Hi, everybody, welcome. We'll just get started in another minute here. I'll let everybody get in. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Laura O'Connor, and I am the Director of Membership for CFMA, and I'm delighted that you've joined us today for our Member Benefit Series presentation featuring CFMA's newest member preferred program from Commerce Payments. Today's presentation will focus on practical ways construction companies can streamline the payment process, improve visibility, reduce risk, and strengthen relationships with subcontractors and suppliers. We're fortunate to have an outstanding presenter with us today. Jason Turner serves as Vice President and National Solution Consulting Manager at Commerce Payments. Jason joined Commerce Payments in 2013 and brings more than 20 years of experience in accounts payable automation. He leads the National Solution Consulting team, partnering with clients across industries to drive efficiencies, improve processes, and reduce costs. In addition to leading solution consulting efforts, Jason supports business development through strategic sales guidance and post-sale value realization, helping organizations achieve scalable, long-term success through AP and AR automation. Jason, thank you for being with us here today and for sharing your expertise with our members. We're looking forward to learning from your experience. With that, I'll turn it over to you. Jason?
Wonderful. Laura, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We appreciate the CFMA and really appreciate the members that are joining us today. Really appreciate taking time from your busy day. And so I've got a fair amount of content. We're a couple minutes in, so let's go ahead and get started. Firstly, I want to share a bit about who Commerce Payments is, a little more broadly who Commerce Bank is. The bank's been around for 160 years, so we've got tenure in the industry. We hold an A2 rating from Moody's, which puts us among the top 12 rated banks in the country, while being number 42 based on asset size. So what does that mean? Well, we play well outside of our weight class, especially when it comes to payments. Now, the dark green that you see on the map here is our core bank footprint. We also have our expansion markets in the regular green shading, and the light green shows that our payment services are coast to coast and everywhere in between. Now, building off of that, Commerce Payments has made a deliberate choice to focus on the construction industry for a number of years now. It's why we value our work with the CFMA and why we've built solutions in payments, credit, merchant services, and equipment finance that serve the unique needs of the construction industry, supported by dedicated teams. And speaking of payment solutions built for construction, as Laura mentioned, I am thrilled to announce and share our new partnership program that we have with the CFMA. This new partnership, the Member Preferred Program, not only supports your company's profitability by providing solutions that bring efficiencies, reduce costs, and also bring revenue from the AP payments that you're making today. We also direct a portion of revenue back to your local CFMA chapter, and we're really excited to see the benefits that that brings. Now, if anyone has any questions about this program or would like more information, please contact our National Strategic Partnership Executive, Amy Sue Bliss, at the email on the screen. Now, let's dig into what likely brought you here today. So here's a quick roadmap to set the stage. This is an educational session built on what we see working across construction finance teams. This session is about how construction payments actually move and where the friction lives. This is driven from what we've learned supporting our construction clients and what we want to share with the membership of CFMA. So first, I'll touch on why paying subs in construction is genuinely different. Then I want to talk about the payment pain points that we hear most and what really drives those. After that, I want to talk about how we find the right method of payment and then bringing it all together with a connected payment hub. And finally, I hope to have some time for Q&A and discussion so that you leave with ideas to take back to your team. That being said, feel free to drop questions in the chat as I'm going along, and we can address those as they come up. Paying subcontractors in construction is not like paying vendors in most other industries. We see payments moving through tiers of subs as well as suppliers, and each of them have their own terms as well as time. You also have retainage and lien waivers, along with compliance documentation that all controls when a payment can actually be released. So, in other words, the money can be approved to be paid and still not yet be payable. And the stakes of this show up in the field. A single late payment can impact crew availability, the schedule, and the trust that subs have placed in you. Yet, in the conversations we're having, many outflows still run on checks and batch cycles that were never built to scale. And we've seen this firsthand. These pressures are real and they compound as construction companies grow. So the key message here is that how you pay doesn't just affect the ledger, it actually ripples straight into the field. Now let's talk about the pain points that we hear most often from construction finance teams around payments. And I'm curious which of these resonate the most with this audience. So please feel free to share in the chat as I talk through the slide. As I mentioned on the previous slide, most outflows still run on check and batch payment cycles. This means that often subs wait and the relationships that you depend on the most become strained. Second, almost no one has real visibility into where a payment actually stands. Has it been approved? Is it scheduled? Was it sent? Or is it stuck? When a sub calls asking where their money is, very few are able to give a straight answer. The third pain point that we see is the fraud exposure and how that keeps rising. And so when we think about things like vendor change schemes, where someone swaps in new banking details, the check washing that I think we thought went away, but is definitely back, and we're seeing that pretty frequently. Add in duplicate payments that slip through manual processes. There's a big risk here, and it requires diligence and proper procedures to mitigate this risk as much as possible. And fourth, the well-intended fix of pushing every supplier onto a single payment method can actually backfire and create further friction with the partners that you can least afford to lose. Some of the hardest problems in construction AP today live on the payment side, from slow payments, lack of visibility, fraud, and finding the right payment method fit for each supplier. So what's driving this friction? Now, if there's a silver lining in all of it, it's that what we're seeing is actually structural. It's not a people issue. So similar to the previous slide, feel free to share in the chat which of these resonates the most with you and with your organization. The biggest driver that we're seeing is that payment data often lives in separate systems between the ERP, the project tools, and the bank interface. So no one shares a single view of where a payment actually stands. Checks and manual payment runs simply don't scale as the project and vendor count grows. Additionally, the remittance detail can be thin. So even once a payment is received, suppliers often cannot tell which invoices that payment covers, which generates status calls and manual matching. And it further stretches the gap between approved and ultimately paid. So remember, this friction is structural and structure can be fixed. And this is what makes a payment strategy so important and what the payment methods that we're going to walk through shortly are designed to accomplish. Now, before we jump into that, though, I do want to share a story that we heard. And it involved a small concrete subcontractor. They were family owned, probably around 30 employees. They've been in business a long time. The GC that we were talking with had partnered with this sub on several past projects. And this one in particular was a mid-sized medical office building. Now, what happened? Well, the sub completed a $95,000 phase of foundation work. It was on schedule, no punch list items, everything was inspected and approved, clean paperwork, lien waiver included. By all accounts, this should have been a very straightforward payment. But here's where it broke down. The approval took almost 2 weeks. It went directly to the project manager's inbox, and it was missed for a couple of days. It was then forwarded to AP to be entered and approved, but with the wrong coding. So it bounced around for another week. Then the problem got worse. The payment just missed the current week's run, so it didn't get printed until the following week. When the check run finally happened, the check was printed, stuffed, and mailed, and then it sat in the postal system for over a week. Additionally, the sub had no way to see that a payment was even on its way. It had now been over 30 days. Adding insult to injury, the remittance details didn't line up with anything in their receivable system. So it took another handful of days to post that payment. Just under 40 days in total. The substandard terms were net 30. They waited almost 6 weeks for a payment that was approved 2 weeks after receiving. Now, here's the part that matters. The sub is a small company. A $95,000 receivable sitting out there for almost 40 days isn't an inconvenience. It's a cash flow problem. They had payroll to cover, materials to buy, and equipment leases that were due. The owner called the GC's AP department every few days once it was past due, asking where the check was. But no one could give him a straight answer because nobody had that visibility into where the payment actually sat. So what did the sub do? Well, he got a call from another GC who needed a concrete crew for a retail project that was starting the following week. Pay was comparable, and that GC had a reputation for paying within 25 days. The sub owner made a business decision. He pulled his best crew off the medical office job and reassigned them to the new project. He didn't do it out of spite. He did it because he has to protect his cash flow and keep his people working. And there's a ripple effect. That medical office project lost its concrete crew mid-phase. The next available crew from another sub couldn't start for 2 weeks. That 2-week gap pushed the framing schedule back, which delayed the mechanical rough-in, which shifted the timeline. Lots of questions were being asked, and it was a bad look for the GC. The total cost of the schedule slip easily 5 to 10 times the original invoice amount. Once you factor in delay penalties, idle labor on other trades, and scrambling to find a replacement crew. Now, this wasn't a cash problem. The GC had the money. It was a process problem. The invoice sat in an inbox. Money traveled through a manual batch check process. No electronic options, poor remittance detail, no visibility. Nobody in the GC's office made a deliberate decision to pay late. It just happened. And that's actually worse because it means it's systemic. It was happening on other payments too. They just hadn't felt those consequences yet. Subcontractors talk. Word gets around about which GCs pay reliably, which ones don't. Over time, the GCs will slow payment processes, get worse pricing. They get less schedule flexibility and lower priority from the best trade partners. This is a challenge that we've heard too often. Now, the bottom line, payment efficiency isn't just a finance metric. It's a competitive advantage on the field. The GCs who pay well and on time attract and retain the best subs, and that directly impacts project quality and timeline. So think about what could have been different here. If the moment that invoice was approved and it hit the term, that payment went out electronically, and it had all the remittance detail that was necessary, visible on both sides end to end. The sub would have seen it coming. They would have known exactly what job it covered, had cash in days, not weeks, and that crew would have still been on the job. So the takeaway here is simple. Paying your subs well isn't generosity. It's actually strategy. Now, before we dig into payment strategy, let's be honest about where AP actually breaks down. For most construction and project-based finance teams, the pain starts the moment an invoice arrives. This slide lays it out pretty simply. Friction on the left, the fixes on the right. From a friction standpoint, usually comes down to 4 things. Sheer volume, high invoice counts per project, a messy mix of PO and non-PO invoices that don't follow the same path. Then you've got the manual work, So staff spending a bunch of time banging on keyboards to enter invoices and then chasing approvals by email. Third, the systems don't talk. AP, project management, and accounting, they can all live in separate places. So data has to be either re-entered or reconciled by hand. And lastly, no one can see status. When a PM or a vendor asks, "Where's my invoice?" the honest answer is often, "Let me go try to find out." So how do we solve this? Well, the good news is none of this is unsolvable. Centralized invoice intake and digital capture gets every invoice into one place and gets approvals moving faster. Automated workflows handle both PO as well as non-PO invoices. So the exceptions stop being special projects. Your controls stay exactly where they are. We're automating the capture, the coding, the matching, but not removing any approvals. And where the systems don't natively connect, we help bridge the data so that it flows instead of having to be rekeyed. Now, here's the important part. Fixing the front end is generally worth doing, but it's only half the story. Once an invoice is approved, the payment step is where most of the remaining delay, cost, and risk actually live. And it's the piece teams underinvest in. Many leaders treat payment method, timing, and remittance as a deliberate strategy. And that's exactly where we spend the rest of our time today. So we're going to talk about virtual card, ACH, ACH Plus, and an integrated payable solution. So how do you build a true AP payment strategy? Your payment strategy has to be deliberate and disciplined. It's not an afterthought. So start by segmenting suppliers by spend, volume, complexity, how critical the relationship is. Then match that to the right method to the trade-off between cost, speed, control, and data. Now, to ensure that you're making progress on the strategy, you need to define measurable goals. One easy goal to set is around how much you plan to shift from check to electronic. And as you're looking at which payment options fit with your supplier segments, be deliberate in that process and looking at the benefits the supplier receives, as well as the benefits that your company is receiving. The strategy means choosing methods on purpose, supplier by supplier. Now, let's talk about the electronic options available, and we'll start with virtual card. So quick explanation for virtual cards and some of the benefits on both sides. These are typically single-use ghost cards, so there's no plastic. It's just a 16-digit number authorized for the exact amount of the payment. The supplier receives an email, they go to their point of sale, they collect the funds. Some suppliers really appreciate this because the funds are immediate, they're guaranteed, and there's working capital benefits to that for them. So where do these fit when looking at your supplier segments that we talked about previously? From our experience, virtual card shines for high volume, low dispute suppliers that value fast settlement and detailed remittance. These organizations that succeed by letting suppliers opt in rather than flipping suppliers to card off a network match or holding checks hostage in order to encourage taking the card instead. That's just a really bad practice, and it can lead to very unhappy suppliers. By allowing suppliers to opt in and targeting those suppliers that are a good fit, virtual cards cut the fraud risk and the check issuance without putting a partnership at risk. There's also a nice revenue stream that can be generated as well. Ultimately, this should be around 10 to 20% of your spend. And keep in mind, 10 to 20% of the spend that you'll convert to card. And keep in mind that the suppliers that do accept really appreciate being able to receive payment this way. So if you aren't offering that option, you're really just leaving money on the table. And as a reminder, our member preferred program also sends revenue to your local CFMA chapter. So what's important here is that you capture the right portion of spend, but never at the cost of a key relationship. Now I want to talk about ACH along with ACH Plus. And for those that are not familiar with ACH Plus, I'll share a little bit of info on that. We recognize that for a lot of construction companies who have pushed to shift away from checks, the predominant electronic option is ACH. And there's good reasons for that. It's very cost effective and it's the workhorse for subcontractor payments. ACH Plus, though, brings some added benefits to both the construction company as well as the supplier or the sub. ACH Plus adds rich remittance detail that often directly integrates into their accounts receivable system. So suppliers can quickly apply the payment and ensure that the proper invoices are reconciled. They pay a small fee for this, which then gets shared back to the payer, in this case, the construction company, much like what we see with virtual cards, just at a smaller percentage. This is an opt-in situation. Again, nothing being forced, allowing the suppliers to determine if that small fee on their payment is worth the additional value. And for a lot of them, it is. And it's important to understand that the trigger should be the value of better data, not a volume target. So the payoff is fewer payment inquiries, less manual matching on both sides. Ultimately, you're best off working with a partner that either has an ACH Plus network or is connected to one to leverage this properly. Now let's talk about integrated payables. A payment hub acts as an orchestration layer that helps AP scale. It allows you to maintain control of the payments that you're making and, in a sense, outsource those payments, how those payments are being made. Now, what you want to make sure is that you're looking for either a single file solution or something with API type capabilities to push your approved payments with the necessary remittance detail across, and then have those payments settled in the method the supplier prefers. We look to handle all the enrollment on behalf of our clients, which they found incredibly valuable. It helps to maximize the acceptance on virtual card without forcing their hand, and also pulling everything we can onto ACH Plus, as well as ACH, while still having check as an option. You also want to consider the settlement options that are available. So when you think about virtual cards, these can often come with a credit line, which allows your suppliers to be paid to term, but then you're paying after that based on the terms of that line, which allows you to hold on to your cash longer. There's also options where you open an account for the non-card payments to clear from. And in that case, you can take advantage of check flow. The alternative is having payments settle on a bank-owned account, which takes escheatment off of your plate. There's other benefits to each, but having the options are really important to look for. So real quick on this slide, protection really should be a byproduct of a better process design. So we touched on the friction that fraud causes and some of the solutions that ultimately provide controls that help reduce, not create more of that friction. And so you want these embedded within that process, as opposed to just piling on manual checkpoints and things like that that can be disruptive. So a centralized invoice flow improves duplicate detection across your jobs and entities. And most important, automation should protect those vendor relationships, not override them. Now, I want to share some best practices that you should see from others that are looking to earn your business. A genuine consultative review looks at the entire payment lifecycle, not just which suppliers happen to accept a card. It surfaces working capital leaks, duplicate spend, and relationship friction that could be hiding in your current process. Even if you already have a program in place, a fresh complimentary review often finds money sitting on the table. And there's a lot of value from consultative expertise and an honest read of your operation, not just trading a spend file for a pie in the sky number that might be unrealistic without further understanding your business. This might be a great step for many of you here today. As we wrap up, I want to highlight why working with a bank is so beneficial. Some of you may have heard the expression one throat to choke. The idea is that you've got one party that you're working with that can give you the answer that you need. For us, that's our account management team. Having fewer parties in the flow means fewer points of risk, less finger pointing, and clearer accountability when something goes wrong. We've found that payments are the door opener, and knowing that we can support credit lines, real estate, equipment financing, etc., across your whole operation can bring a lot of value. Lastly, trust and stability. We've been around for over 160 years for a reason. We're experts when it comes to payments, and the rules and regulations behind them. And that really matters when someone's moving your money and standing behind it. Now, as we wind down our time, I've got a few questions here to think about and take back to your teams. So, where is your AP process relying too heavy on email, paper, or spreadsheets today? Which of your supplier segments genuinely fit virtual card or ACH or ACH plus? And which of those relationships are too critical to risk? Where do the payment status and remittance visibility break down most often? And lastly, how many parties actually sit between you and your vendors today? And who's accountable when something goes wrong? I want to thank the CFMA for the opportunity to share this information. And I also want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to join us here on the week leading up to our nation's 250th birthday. Now, I'd like to open things up to any questions with the time that we have left. Laura and team, do we get any questions coming through on the chat?
Not seeing any questions in the chat.
Yeah, no questions yet, but if you any questions or even comments, if you want to post, we're happy to read them for you.
No,
Please
we're
do.
getting some hearts and some hand waving. Yes, we will share the slide deck and a copy of the recording. An email will go out to all the attendees in a couple days. Here we go. What are some implementation issues a company can expect?
Great question. Okay, so implementation issues. Let's call them opportunities, right? I think the biggest thing is whenever you're undertaking anything like this, change management, right? So when you're going through this process, depending on what level of automation you're looking at, things of that nature, you want to make sure you've got your whole team on board, that they understand, what change is taking place and ultimately what that's going to look like for them. Because in a lot of cases, there might be some apprehension, there might be some anxiety, just kind of fear of the unknown. And so getting them engaged early will actually help prevent a lot of the implementation challenges that could pop up, because some of that can just come from folks that are uncomfortable with what's happening, unaware, and maybe they're holding back information, different things like that. So as much as you can involve everyone in the process, that's going to be better. The other thing is making sure that if there is some, file exchanges or API connectivity, things like that, having your IT ready and making sure that they're clear as far as what's expected. And so you want to know going into that implementation, what is that going to look like, right? What is that level of effort? And so working with, whomever the provider is to understand that and what that looks like for them.
Any more questions? All right. Well, we're at 2:29. So, Jason, anything else to add?
I just hope everyone has a great rest of the week and a safe and happy 4th of July.
All right. And I want to thank you and Amy Sue from Commerce Payments for joining us today with this great presentation. It was so informative. As I said, we will be sending it out via email to all the attendees, the slides, as well as the recording and some information and directions how to find the member preferred program. So we do hope that you will check that out. I want to thank you all for joining us here today to learn more about the member preferred program from Commerce Payments, and have a wonderful rest of your day and a great holiday week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Betty.